Welcome to the Freelance Drive. Here we talk with skilled freelancers about their professional journey. Stay tuned for real-life experiences to learn and actionable steps to take to improve your freelancing career. My name is Yuri. I'm a community builder at Code Control and 9am.works, and my guest is Amy Rogers, a freelance product designer, a certified Notion consultant, one only a few in the UK and about 70 in the world, who's also building her own creative studio called Gubbins. So, welcome, Amy.
Yeah, thank you.
As I told you before, the moment I saw that you are Notion certified expert, I was like, oh my God, what does it mean? So, you are Notion certified consultant. What does it mean?
So it means that, well, kind of, I'm just good enough at using Notion at this point in my life that I can help a bunch of other people to use it too. So Notion has a bunch of different certifications that they offer people. So that can be to prove that you just know the basics of Notion, or that you're really familiar with how Notion can be set up securely for businesses that kind of need that. So I've done all of them, including the advanced certification, which is like their top level one. And it's to prove that my skills are good enough to help, like I said, to help businesses. That's basically all it is. It's just an official badge, I guess, just to tell people that I am good enough to help them. It's kind of like a confidence thing. And these badges as well, they're available for anyone to use. So whether you're just starting out or whether you've been using Notion for years, like I have, like it's something that you can do.
How much time did it take you to get those badges, to go through the certification process?
Oh gosh. I guess in the end, it took me a few months. So the first thing you need to do to apply for this badge is to show that you have experience with helping people professionally rather than just as a hobbyist. The other thing you will need to do is to go through a practical exam. So to kind of be given a brief, essentially, as if you were helping out a client, and then to build a workspace and then have someone from Notion see that you can do it properly. I think when I took it originally back in 2022, it was a little bit different to how it is now, but the bones of it are still there. It's just proving that you can do it professionally and in kind of like a way that is helpful.
And what are the benefits of being certified by Notion?
I think for me, it was just to be able to prove that I was good enough, like to prove that, because I've been using it for years and I just wanted to know that my skills were good enough to be able to go and help other people. You know, you get a lot of imposter syndrome with these kinds of things where you say, oh, I feel like I'm good, but I don't know if I actually am good enough to help people as a professional. So it kind of gave me that little bit of confidence. And then for businesses and other people, I guess it gives them confidence in that other direction, you know, to say,
Yeah.
oh, okay, it's not just that Amy likes using Notion, it's that she can do it at like that professional level that we need. So yeah, those are, I would say, the main emotional benefits. But then also practically, Notion does work with its consultants to help companies that have come to them. So we'll get work forwarded on to us. So if they need help, they can forward it on to external people that they can trust, kind of like having a little, I don't know what the word is, like a little black book of trusted partners. Like there's just a handful of us in there that Notion can pass work onto. So it's a win-win, really.
Yeah, totally. It's a great approach, like it's like being a freelancer. For example, if you're a great freelancer and you have many incoming jobs, you can't do them all. So you can easily kind of transfer them to some people you like, you are friends with. So
Yeah,
they're kind of
exactly.
like knowing how to build a community, I guess. And so you told a lot about using Notion professionally, and we also will talk about it a little later. So for now, how do you use Notion personally in a personal way?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. For me, like I use it for, let's try and think of a good example. So I play Dungeons and Dragons. So when you play Dungeons and Dragons, you get like a sheet, which is basically a bunch of A4 pieces of paper that you can write down your character's stats on. And if you're a spellcasting character, you can write your spells and things like that. But I've always found that really difficult to use. I don't know, maybe it's just the layout, maybe there's just too much going on. So I made myself a Notion page where I could keep track of, like I said, things like the spells, character details. And then I put that online as well, so other people can use it. But I think that's one thing that I love about Notion is that you can use it professionally. Like it's really powerful for bringing teams together, but then also it's great for hobbyists. It's great for individuals. I think another, and I don't do this anymore, but another thing I used it for was shopping lists. So it's, there are people who do take it to that extreme level where they have an inventory of every little thing in their house, every jar of spice, every packet of rice. And I did for a little bit try doing that. Like I had automations where if I ran out of this particular thing, it would add it to a shopping list. And yeah, I think that's the other danger though of Notion is making a system that's too systemy that kind of takes away from the actual use of it. But it's all about using it, knowing how it helps you and where it's actually becoming a hindrance, and then just not being afraid to build stuff as you need it to.
Yeah, I feel like having this really huge product list and like with all the automation, sometimes it may be a little bit, yeah,
Mm.
I understand what you're talking about. So let's talk about professional usage. So what do you use Notion for in a professional way?
So as a freelancer, there's obviously a lot more admin stuff than if you are just like a full-time employee. So for example, I'll have to send out proposals to people of like scope of work, what it is that I can do, how much it will cost, how long it will take, things like that. And I like writing those in Notion because then you can share it as a web page. And, you know, it's, as you may already know with Notion, you can just build your own single page with it. It's not like a Google Doc where you just make a static A4 page, send it off. With Notion, you can embed things like videos, design files. So I found it's really versatile and easy to share. So I use it for that. Another thing I use it for is tracking invoices. So Notion's database feature is quite robust. It's kind of like an Excel spreadsheet, but with a couple of other little functions in it. So that's where I will keep all of my invoices. I'll attach the little PDF files. Again, I have automations on there. So once someone pays it, it'll go through the system, mark it as done, or that kind of thing. And the other main thing I use Notion for professionally is, so Notion released their calendar app earlier this year. So now I use that to keep track of the stuff that I do both for Gubbins and as an individual freelancer. I manage my personal calendar in there as well. And then also I can sync, if I have a Notion page for a particular day or an event, then that goes into Notion calendar too. So I can access it quickly. So for example, like this recording right now, I made notes of things I kind of wanted to cover and they are in Notion. So it was really easy for me to find them before this call. That's very meta, but yeah, that's kind of how I used it. It's a very practical example.
And let's talk a little about the automation. How do you do it? What additional tools do you use? And like, how do you understand that you have to automate something?
So there are two ways that I automate with Notion. One is within Notion itself. So it's very basic, but it's also very helpful. Notion has these buttons that when you push them, it can do things like add new pages or change the status of something in a database. And they're just really quick, easy ways of doing repeatable tasks without having to do all the manual steps yourself. And the other way I automate stuff is with Make, which is an external tool, but it kind of handles data pipelines in a way that's, I'm really not describing it that well, but it handles data in a way that previously you would have to like click and drag or type. Make just does a lot of that stuff automatically. So for example, if I got an email from someone on my website, it would take their message, their email address, and put it into a Notion database. So I wouldn't have to keep going back into my email inbox or, you know, go on to my website and to get that information. It's just automatically pulled into Notion for me. What was your other question? Sorry, there was a second part to that question on automations.
Yeah, the second part, how do you decide what to automate? But you kind of partly answered already.
I can cover a bit more on that though, because it is a really good thing to bring up. So I think the temptation with automation is to do it for everything, for every little thing, like, oh, I'll just build an
Yeah.
automation for this. But again, like I said before, with building too much of a system and it getting in your way and tangling things up, I find that the best things to automate are things that I've done like half a dozen times. And every time I'm like, well, this is kind of boring, it's quick. Like I could just have a single button that does all of this. And I think those are the opportunities for automation. It makes sense to build it as you go rather than to try and think right from the beginning, okay, this is how this whole system is going to work. It needs to organically grow if it's going to be fit for purpose.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of automation. First of all, let's talk about the things that you use Notion for, that you told about, the keeping invoices and like preparing for things and how it works. So, I mean, in a way, that how can freelancers also use Notion to improve their workflows and to become more productive?
I think doing the things that I'm already doing is kind of a lot of a freelancer's roster. Like I said, like pitching for work and then tracking all of the financial side of it. I think that stuff has been invaluable to me. And I know that there are other third-party tools that can handle that stuff. I mentioned Google Docs before. But having it all in one place rather than having to manage multiple accounts on these different services has been really cool. Another thing that you could use Notion for, I don't use it so much because I prefer pen and paper and then transferring it, but meeting notes is another really big one. So, for example, if after this talk we wanted to share the summary of what we talked about, we could be typing it up in Notion and then I can share that page with you. And again, keeping it all in one place. Like everything's done in Notion rather than having this in a Google Doc, this on a Slack channel, this on a Trello board, etc. I think as well, and again, I've not used it that much, but Notion's starting to build out a lot of AI capability. So at the end of this call, there could be something within Notion that automatically summarizes what we spoke about. So I think tools like that are really powerful, just saving a lot of the legwork, a lot of the context switching between tools. That's what I think is a lot of the value of Notion.
I've heard a lot about Notion AI, but I've never used it. So how do you use it?
Again, like I've not used it that much either, really. But where I have used it, it has been quite good. So let's try and think of a good example. When I was, again, going back to D&D, I guess, coming up for descriptions of random treasure items that you could find, while you're exploring the world. I think there are a list of things you can use, but if you want to make your own, sometimes it can be hard to know where to start. So I used Notion AI. I just kind of typed in a prompt of like, oh, make me 20 magical items that when you use them, they may also go wrong in some way. And Notion just gave me like a big list of things I could do. And then I could use that as a base to make ones that fit a bit better. We're still in the early stages of AI, I think, where the ideas it generates aren't as creative as what humans can come up with, but it's also really good as a starting point. It's like starting from a sketch versus starting from a blank page. I think having that baked into Notion is really helpful. If you're someone who is, for example, writing a lot of reports, being able to generate that baseline quite quickly. I think another thing, again, not really used to it much myself, is that, the AI can also be used for things like translation. So if you have a database and you put in like the English translation and you wanted to translate it into like French, German, etc., that can be done automatically too. So there's loads of capability, and it's the same with a lot of these no-code tools. There's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of potential, but it's just about how you as an individual use it. That's where the power is. It's in the ability to make stuff yourself, which until now, like a lot of the times with tools, you're just like, oh, I'll just have what they give me. But being able to customize it and build it yourself is really cool.
What is the best way to start working with Notion if somebody's never heard about it yet?
Just give it a go. Like that's how I started so I would take my weekly to-dos down on a piece of paper. So I just started putting them in Notion instead and then built out and learned from there. I think one thing that trips a lot of people up with starting with Notion is seeing other people's dashboards and seeing all these really beautiful aesthetic pages, being like, oh gosh, I have to make something like that for it to work. Like, or again, like I said before, trying to automate everything up front, being like, okay, I have to build the perfect system. But it's not like that at all. Like, it's okay to make a bit of a mess. It's okay to just try something and it not work, and then to get rid of it and try something else. Like, I do say to people, if you want to learn like the next steps, that's when it's good to download the templates and understand how they're built and to really see what you can do. But if you're just starting, just start, just get like a blank page, just make a little list, and that's all you need. You'll learn as you go. You pick up new things where you need them. So it's okay to not get it right the first time.
And what's the role of the Notion community in this learning process?
It's massive. Like, it's super powerful, and everybody is also really enthusiastic. So I think that's one of Notion's main sticking points, is that the community is so, I can't even think of a word for it. The community's really enthusiastic, I guess is the word. Like, there's the subreddit where people will ask questions, share templates, give advice, that kind of thing. There's also, I mentioned it before, the ambassador community. So they are kind of like Notion consultants. It's another group of Notion enthusiasts who will organize events. They will talk about Notion online, maybe their influencers, that sort of thing. And I think the power of not just having the Notion team being the spokespeople, but having people like me to chat about it, to tell people about it organically, it's really powerful.
Name one thing that is not obvious in Notion, but is definitely a game changer after you know it.
Trying to remember what thinking about this earlier. I think there's two. One is, so in Notion, you can use databases. I have mentioned them before. They're kind of like Excel spreadsheets, but the power of relations and rollups. So that's where you would connect two databases together and they would stay in sync, which is huge. Once you figure that out, it's like everything just kind of clicks in your brain. So being able to have, so for example, one way I use it is I will have a database of clients, and in there I will have like people's names, email addresses, pages that I have shared with them, etc. And then in another database, I can have invoices, and then I can link clients to invoices and invoices to clients. So I can keep those two things constantly in sync. I don't have to like rush between different pages trying to keep everything together. And if I updated the client contact email, for example, it would automatically sync to the invoices one. So it's just understanding how that synergizes is just, you feel like a wizard when you get it all connected. It's really good. And then the other thing that's a bit more accessible. So a lot of these fancy Notion templates use columns. So there'll be like stuff beside each other rather than just in one big column. And whenever I demonstrate that all you have to do that is to pick up one thing and drag and drop it next to another, it always, like, if people haven't seen it before, they're always like, what? I didn't know you could do that. It's amazing. And yeah, so that's something I always bring up in these kinds of questions. It's like, just play around with columns. It feels really good to make the layouts. It can be a bit tricky, but then once you get it, again, you'll feel like a wizard. It's very, very cool, very useful.
Yeah, got it. I mean, I really wish to have the sky as a limit, but time is a limit to our conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So the final question is, what is your favorite food?
Oh, gosh. I love Japanese cuisine. So I'm a big sushi fan, love sushi. And then ramen as well, like the proper noodles in the broth. I love like a really salty pork ramen. Yep.
Got it. And, I know that you shared just small part of your experience, and I would love to really learn even more from you. And thank you so much for giving us this dive into Notion and understanding on what you can really do with it. And it's been such a pleasure to hear and learn from you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, hit the like button or 5 stars and share it with your friend. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.